The 2024-2025 NFL season is officially underway. I know all of us are very, very excited, and I thought one of the greatest week ones of my lifetime. A lot of really, really fun games, a few kind of stinkers, but that's to be expected in week one. And man, quarterback play was, if that's something you guys are into, it was not to be desired this week. But I am going to be giving a little snippet on every single game and every single team after week one. Starting with the reigning Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. They look like the same old Chiefs to me. They probably look like the same old Chiefs to you. Definitely the Chiefs circa Tyreek Hill days, because Xavier Worthy looked fantastic. Just to be frank and honest with you, I honestly thought that Xavier Worthy had bust potential written all over him. Guys that, go late in the draft like that, or late in the first round anyway, that basically their only kind of trait that they're famous for is speed. They have a very high bust percentage, somebody similar to a John Ross, but Xavier Worthy certainly did not look like a bust on Thursday night. He looked fantastic. The Chiefs looked great. Their defense looked like they came ready to play, although obviously they were one toe away from losing this one, but they do pull out a tough win at home. But we'll see if they can continue to get better, and we'll see where they go for the rest of the season. As for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson still, just at times, does not seem to have the accuracy he needs to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Obviously, he's a multiple-time MVP. Obviously, we all consider him to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and that is why it is so frustrating when you see him miss wide-open guys, miss reads, not even just miss guys that are open and he doesn't throw them the ball, but when he does throw them the ball, he just completely airmails them at times. Obviously, the most famous example from this past week being when he missed Zay Flowers wide open in the end zone. Nobody even, within 5 yards of him would have given them a shot to potentially tie the game. But they ultimately did lose. But there's no reason to panic if you are the Ravens. We'll see how heavily involved Derrick Henry is going to be throughout the season. They did say that 30 carries a game is not going to be the plan for him, nor should it be at this point in his career, and nor should it be just in terms of the Ravens' offense. But if they want to win the Super Bowl, Lamar Jackson has to get better at hitting his open receivers and just kind of that entire game. He can't just rely on his legs. He can't just rely on his running ability. He has got to be a more improved passer in terms of throwing the football. And by the way, Isaiah Likely. Who would have figured that Isaiah Likely would have the breakout game of his career? He's the number 2 tight end behind one of the best in the game in Mark Andrews. Is there a tight end controversy brewing in Baltimore? We're going to have to find out. Next up, we'll talk about the Eagles. Saquon Barkley looked absolutely spectacular in his debut for the Eagles, as we kind of all thought he would. He did start out pretty poor in the first half, but really picked it up in the second half. 3 touchdowns in his debut. Obviously, you'll certainly take that if you're the Eagles. The Eagles do narrowly pull out a victory against a very game Packers team. But, again, kind of similar to what I said with Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts sometimes just looks lost out there. He's not very accurate at times, and he seems to just kind of get lost out there. And obviously this is something that's going to need to be improved on if the Eagles are going to get back to the Super Bowl like they did a couple of years ago. So we'll see if Jalen Hurts can build off this performance and improve, or if he kind of stays similar to what he was doing at the end of last year, which ultimately led to them losing quite a bit of games. Not solely, obviously, but it certainly played a big part. As for the Packers, it's a tough one. Obviously, Jalen Reed looked great. Your offense looked really, really good. It would have just been a tough loss, but even tougher is losing Jordan Love for 3 or 4 weeks. It's obviously not as bad as what it looked. Everybody kind of thought it was ACL, especially when you kind of slow the video down. You can see a bit of a pop, but it does not appear to be as serious as it looked. He looks to be only out anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, and most likely it's going to be somewhere in the 3 to 4 range based on what I saw, which was anywhere from a grade 1, which is anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks, and a grade 2, which is anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. So typically, if you're in between a 1 and a 2, you're probably in that 3 to 4 week range. But obviously, we will see what happens. It could take a little longer for him to recover, but luckily, Jordan Love has seemed to avoid season-ending injury, which the Packers fans probably held collectively their entire breath as a franchise there. But luckily, he seems to be relatively okay as to what we saw, and hopefully he'll get back to playing as soon as possible. Next up, my New England Patriots. They won a game. That's crazy. Not as crazy when you kind of look at the total picture, which I'll talk about when I get to the Bengals. But the Patriots get a Week 1 win. Jerod Mayo with his first win as head coach. Obviously, as good as the Patriots probably expected to play. Their offense still looked anemic. Their offense did not look all that explosive or all that dynamic, but at the very least, they looked competent, which is not something that they have looked. The offense has looked horrible, incompetent over the last couple of years, and at the very least, there was a purpose to what they were doing. They weren't turning the ball over like crazy. The running game actually worked. The offensive line that has been terrible all offseason actually didn't play too bad on Sunday. Now, I won't say they played great, but they didn't play too bad. And as a Patriots fan, it's all you can ask for. We'll see if they could build off of this and actually string a 6 or 7 win season together. I still don't think they do. I think this was just a kind of result of circumstance, which I'll talk to you about here when I get to the Bengals. The Bengals couldn't win a Week 1 game if their lives depended on it. And unfortunately, this has been a trend over the last few seasons. I believe the stat is now 1-10 has Joe Burrow been in Weeks 1 and 2 over his career. So he is a stereotypical slow starter. So I am not looking too deep into this in terms of how, hitting the panic button for the Bengals just yet. However, I will say that it does worry me when you see Joe Burrow shaking his wrists a lot. It does worry me when you see Ja'Marr Chase not really able to get open as often as stereotypically he would. Even though I'm a big fan of Christian Gonzalez, Ja'Marr Chase is one of the most dynamic receivers in the NFL. It does worry me that he was not able to get open, especially considering the contract situation that's looming over the entire franchise right now. Is he giving it his all? I'm going to assume he is for now. No reason to panic. No reason to kind of lose your minds. But I am starting to get a little worried. Is Joe Burrow ever going to be the same? Will he be able to bounce back? Or is he going to permanently regress? We'll see as the year kind of goes along. Next up, division rival of the Bengals, or at least one of them, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Same old Steelers. I said that for the Chiefs. Same old Chiefs, same old Steelers. The Steelers just find ways to win games despite the fact that they're terrible. They gained -9 yards and yet still somehow find ways to win. Obviously, Russell Wilson was supposed to be the starting quarterback. He was named the starting quarterback, and then a couple of days later, he came up with an injury. I don't exactly remember what the injury was, but Justin Fields started. He fumbled the ball, like he always does, and he didn't play particularly well, like he usually does. And yet they still somehow found a way to win the game. Because they're the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's just what they do. Doesn't really shock me. Not really much else to talk about. This has to be such a disappointing start for the Falcons. Although Kyle Pitts did score a touchdown, which that usually doesn't happen, so good for him. But regardless, again, this has to be such a disappointing start for the Falcons. They have such high expectations. I obviously picked them to win the division this year. This was not a good way to start. The Steelers are a very, very beatable team, and they have no excuses now. They have improved their defense. They've signed a few guys on that defensive side of the ball, and their defense showed up today. I believe only 16 or 18 points, something like that the Steelers scored. Certainly a winnable game. The offense just did not show up once again. Bijan Robinson only had 60-something rushing yards. He is one of the most dynamic running backs in football. If they can't get him going, it's going to be a long year. Kirk Cousins is going to have to play better. The entire offense and offensive line is going to have to play better. The defense, they did their job. Hopefully they can keep it up. We'll see how this progresses for the Falcons. But, again, as this is going to be a theme throughout this entire video, no reason to panic yet, at least for most of these teams. How in the world did the Bills score 34 points on Sunday? How in the world did the Bills play this well? Honestly, their offense looked terrible. If you look at the stats on this game, nobody did particularly well. Josh Allen didn't really play particularly well. None of their offensive weapons actually had crazy games. They didn't really run the ball very effectively. They let up a lot of pressure. They turned the ball over a little bit. It just doesn't seem like a game where you would score 34 points. Yes, I do believe that they had a defensive touchdown, which helps, although I could be wrong about that. But regardless, I don't understand how the Bills played as well as they did. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, the Cardinals' defense is really, really, really bad. That's how they did it. And it's not just the defense that's a problem for the Cardinals. Their offensive line played absolutely terrible. Kyler Murray was running for his life pretty much all game. I know he only got sacked, I think, 4 times, maybe 5, which 5 is still too many. But it could have been 10, 12. I mean, if it wasn't a very mobile quarterback, he would have been on the ground pretty much the entire day. So, got to improve that offensive line if you're the Cardinals. I know they've invested heavily in that offensive line in recent drafts, but they've got to continue to improve. They've got to protect their franchise quarterback, or presumed franchise quarterback anyway. But yeah, their defense, really bad. Their offensive line has been really, really bad. The Cardinals may not be too great this year, but none of us really expected them to be. But again, not really a whole lot of reason to panic just yet. They did end up scoring 28 points, but the Bills' defense wasn't that great either. So we'll see, but regardless, tough day for the Cardinals. Speaking of tough day, the Chicago Bears, they win this game, but man, Caleb Williams looked like he was lost. He looked absolutely terrible. They're able to sneak out a win, which in a lot of ways has to feel great if you're the Bears. You know, your franchise quarterback that you invested so much in, so many draft picks, all this media coverage, you gotten all these weapons for, an offensive lineman for, you built a defense to try to help him out. You know, he didn't play well at all, and yet you still found a way to win the game. That has to feel good, but at the same time, you know, you've got to figure out a way to get Caleb Williams going. Now, they did play Tennessee, which obviously is a really, really good defense. I believe they are second in the league in opponent passer rating right now in terms of allowing the lowest passer rating in the league. So they're second in that, which is obviously great. But at the same time, you really hope that they have a better day considering how poorly the other guys played. Yeah, there's really no excuse for the Titans winning this game. They played so poorly on offense that somehow a defense that allowed Caleb Williams to only have like 100 total passing yards was somehow matched, if not worsened, by the play of Will Levis. That pick six at the end was absolutely horrendous. He has been getting completely ruined by that play on social media, as he should. Although he is being a good leader, he's stepping up, he's taking ownership of it, which is what you want to see out of a young quarterback. I'm not panicking on the Titans just yet. I don't expect the Titans to be very good, but I know the Titans expect themselves to be very good. They have invested a lot of money into this roster. They have made a bunch of free agent signings over the last 3 to 4 years on their receiving core, their offensive line, on their defense, that they are hoping are going to be kind of complementary pieces to who they've drafted, and what they're going to be doing this year is not living up, to what they probably think they should be doing as of yet, but again, it's only 1 week. We'll see if they can improve. Speaking of improvement, the Houston Texans, this team is going to be a problem. They looked great on Sunday against a pretty good opponent as well, so you like to see that everything seems to have been working. Obviously, there's some growing pains. C.J. Stroud didn't have a great game. Stephon Diggs didn't have a great game either, but at the same time, there's, you won a game against a good opponent in week 1, and you have room for improvement. That just sounds like a normal week 1 to me. The Texans are going to be a problem this year. Another person that may be a problem is AR-15. Man, that kid looked great this weekend. He did everything he could to pull out the win, the upset win for the Colts. Just ended up coming a little bit short. But I talked about in my video last week or the week before where I mentioned that I thought the Indianapolis Colts could make some noise, and Dan Lindsay actually picked them to make the playoffs this year. I didn't quite go as far as that, but regardless, both of us are very, very high on the Indianapolis Colts, and they showed why this weekend. They looked really, really good. Their defense looked improved. Their offense looked like they actually knew what they were doing because they didn't have Gardner Minshew as their quarterback. They actually had somebody who was competent back there, and so, yeah, they're going to be a problem. I would be very, very happy, not necessarily happy that they lost, but I would take it as a really solid week 1. You played against one of the best teams, projected to be at least, in the NFL, and you played them very, very close. You had a chance to win. It just didn't end up falling for you, but I still think great week for the Colts. 2 teams who did not have a great week were, one of them being the Miami Dolphins. Yes, I understand that they ended up winning the game, but man, they just don't look like the same team to me. Their offense looked okay. Obviously, Tyreek Hill and Tua had pretty good stats. Jalen Waddle's going to do what Jalen Waddle does. I think he had over 100 yards as well. So that all looked normal, but their defense does not look quite the same. Obviously, Jalen Phillips isn't quite 100%. Bradley Chubb's not out there, so it's hard to kind of judge them fully because they're not 100% fully healthy. But even last year, when they were fully healthy at times, their defense didn't look very, very good. And this year they lost quite a few pieces as well. They did lock up Jalen Ramsey long-term, which obviously is a good boon for them in their back end and their secondary. And Javon Holland is great, but I just am worried that their defense is going to take a major step back, and that's going to be a difference between winning 11 games and possibly the division and only 9 or even 8 games and missing out on the playoffs entirely, because the AFC is stacked this year, and if you don't win your division, it's going to be really, really hard to actually make the playoffs unless you are in the AFC North, because the AFC North is obviously going to be really, really good. So, we'll see what happens, but I don't know, man. The Dolphins, they scare me a little bit. Whoa, the Jaguars. Look, I understand that it's just 1 week, but Trevor Lawrence does not look like he has improved in the slightest. And that's sad because he signed one of the biggest contracts in NFL history this offseason. All of us are rooting for him to kind of improve, and it just did not happen for him this year. Or, excuse me, I'm going to start that over. Oh, the Jaguars. Look, Trevor Lawrence looked awful, okay? And it just doesn't look like he's improved at all. And that's a shame because he obviously signed a huge contract this offseason. I think we're all collectively, unless you just don't like the Jaguars for some reason, rooting for him to improve because he seems like he's a decent guy. And we kind of all expected him to be great. But it just hasn't happened so far. And unfortunately, he looked really bad against what I just said was not that great of a defense. Obviously, they have some good pieces on that defense, but they don't have very many good pieces, and they don't have a lot of depth either. So if you were going to take advantage of a defense, they're bottom 10 in a lot of categories by the end of the year, at least for what I'm expecting to happen. That's a defense that you can exploit, and it just did not happen. What's going to happen when you start playing teams like the Texans and the Colts in your own division that are going to be just better defensively than what the Dolphins were? It's going to be a struggle for the Jags if they keep playing like this, but it's early. We'll see what happens as the year goes along. Hopefully they start to improve. Next up, the New Orleans Saints. Look, I'm not going to overreact. They obviously looked absolutely dominant, but they basically played an XFL team in the Panthers this weekend, so I am certainly not going to overreact. I did love what I saw from Rashid Shaheed. I've been looking for him to break out for the last 2 seasons, and it just hasn't happened yet. But if he can replicate the performance, or at least kind of get close to his performance on a weekly basis, he will solidify himself as the number 2 option to Chris Olave out there in New Orleans. Derek Carr, he's well past his prime now, guys. We obviously know that. I don't anticipate the performance that they had last weekend to kind of carry over into the next few weeks, but who knows? Maybe they will. But I just don't see it. But hey, listen, you can't ask for a better start to the year than beating a team by 30-something points. What do you even say about the Panthers? They just have no luck right now. Obviously, they lost Derek Brown, possibly for the season, who's their best defensive player, or at least one of them, if not their best defensive player. He was going to be kind of looked at as like the anchor of that defense after Brian Burns got traded, and he was injured in 5 seconds. I mean, it's really heartbreaking. And beyond that, they're just not a good team, and you have to be disheartened with Bryce Young. He looked great in the one drive he got in preseason, and a lot of people were saying, oh my goodness, Bryce Young is back. He's going to bounce back. He's going to be just fine. He went out there against admittedly a good defense in New Orleans. They are a good defense. They have some great pieces out there, and they have a lot of depth. So I'm not taking anything away from the New Orleans defense and saying that they're trash or saying anything like that. But you have to be disheartened if you're Bryce Young, because there's a lot of hype for you going into the season. C.J. Stroud obviously took all of the rookie quarterback awards and records and all that stuff last year when it could have been you, because you were taken at number 1 overall, and C.J. Stroud was taken right behind you. You got to be disheartened if you're Carolina. But it's only 1 week. There's still plenty of time for him to improve, and I'm really rooting for him to improve. The last thing I want to see is a team to invest as much as the Carolina Panthers did into getting their guy, and it works out that he's an absolute bust. I don't want to throw that word around yet, but we were kind of all really hoping that he would step up week 1 and show something, anything, in terms of improvement, and unfortunately, he just didn't. Speaking of not really showing anything, the Vikings-Giants game is going to be up next. We'll start with the Vikings. Sam Darnold actually looked not horrendous, but then again, he was playing the Giants, so tough to look terrible when you play against the Giants, but I digress. Gotta love to see what they're going to be doing in Minnesota. Hopefully they still have a good season. Obviously, with J.J. McCarthy out for the year, their hopes are a bit derailed, but who knows? Maybe Sam Darnold can go on a what's his name? Case Keenum, I think it was, quarterback that played for the Vikings. A few years ago had that. Miracle in Minneapolis drive. I think it was Case Keenum. Pretty sure, maybe he could have a Case Keenum-esque season and just kind of have a one-year wonder there. But who knows? Good win for the Vikings. And now this is when it starts to get sad. The Giants were really probably hoping to get something to build off of offensively. The Vikings ranked dead last in the league in points allowed last year and completion percentage allowed against. Dead last, 30th. They are able to be exploited in the pass game. And not only did they not exploit that Vikings defense, they folded over like a beach or lawn chair. Why is Daniel Jones still your quarterback? Oh my goodness, for crying out loud, he's not good. He's never been good. Why are you still paying him? Chargers looked pretty good. J.K. Dobbins, an Ohio State alum, my favorite college team, just hasn't been able to stay healthy. But again, he continues the trend. Every single time he steps onto the field, he looks dominant. The problem is he very rarely actually steps onto the field because his knees and ankles keep on exploding. Hopefully that doesn't continue to happen. I don't want his stuff to keep exploding. But he looks good every time he touches the ball. I had no doubt that if he stayed healthy, he would be the number one option in the backfield because he is just that darn good. Hopefully he continues to build off of that and, again, actually stays healthy. He is young enough. I think he's only 24 or 25, so it's not like he's a 27-year-old or 28-year-old or 29-year-old running back after all these knee injuries. He is still fairly young, so hopefully he will continue to grow, and the Chargers can continue to run the ball a billion times a game like what Jim Harbaugh really, really wants to do. The Raiders are bad. Poor Davante Adams. Next up, the Seahawks. Look, they didn't play all that great. They ran the ball reasonably effectively, didn't really throw the ball all that well, but they're going to have a better pass offense over the next few weeks, although maybe not this week against the Patriots because the Patriots are really, really good defending the pass as well and not so great defending the run, although they did do that well in week one. Regardless, their passing offense is going to improve. They have way too many weapons to not have it improve. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Noah Fant. They have way too many offensive weapons in order to have that not kind of be a thing. And then obviously Kenneth Walker in the backfield is another weapon that you can use in the passing game. But we'll see where they go from here. They looked okay. And honestly, that's kind of what we all think. The Seahawks are just going to be okay. So they seemed to be right on brand in week one. Somebody who did not look okay was Bo Nix. Not only did he not look okay, he looked awful. And this is the exact reason why I did not want Drake May starting in week one. Is because sometimes when you start a rookie quarterback, they go out and they play really, really well. Sometimes when you start a rookie quarterback, they look terrible. Just about every single circumstance of this weekend, outside of maybe Jane Daniels, but I don't know if he played terrible, but he certainly didn't play well either. Just about every other rookie quarterback played absolutely terrible. So as of right now, Drake May, to me, looks the best out of every rookie quarterback. Why? Because he hasn't gone out there and died yet. All the other ones have. This is exactly why I did not want him to start week one. Because, again, you look around the NFL, all the rookie quarterbacks played either terrible or eh. And that was one of them. So, yeah, that doesn't really give me much confidence that if we'd have started Drake May week one, that he would have gone out there and slung it for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. All right, I guess I'll say something else about the Broncos. They're not going to be good this year, are they? Oh, boy. Okay, so Dallas Cowboys. Dak just got a huge contract extension. CeeDee Lamb got a huge contract extension. They're actively working on getting Micah Parsons extended. Maybe we all overreacted a little bit in terms of the Jerry Jones is cheap and doesn't want to keep any of his players, because definitely nobody here said those things. Yeah. I don't want to spend too much time on the Cleveland Browns. My God, just cut Deshaun Watson already. Just cut him already. He's playing terrible. He has more sexual assault and sexual battery allegations. He got out of it the first time. Fine, okay. But this time, I mean, the more and more these things come out, the more and more I just want to punch the guy in the face. Just get him off your team. He's not even playing well. It's not like, he's being accused of sexual assault and he's playing great. He's playing terrible. Just cut him. I know. It's a lot of money. Just cut him. Let Jameis Winston play quarterback. Please. Please. The Bucs look just about the same as they did last year. They were, I think, 9-8 last year, maybe 10-7. They're probably going to finish around the same thing this year. I didn't really see anything this weekend to make me think otherwise. Commanders are in a weird spot. Jaden Daniels flashed some tools, had a couple of rushing touchdowns, but didn't really play all that well when you kind of watch the game and you look at the tape and see the throws that he was making and the reads that he was trying to make. He wasn't able to get through them as well as they would have liked. So the Commanders are in a weird spot. They're in a pretty good division. Obviously, you got two decent teams. You got one really good team. You got a team that may make the playoffs, may not, in the Cowboys. And then you got the Commanders sitting there, and then you got just scraping the bottom of the barrel in the New York Giants. So we'll see what kind of the Commanders lean into. Are they going to try to push for a playoff spot this year, or are they going to really take it out hard like the Giants? It feels like it can go either way. We'll see what happens, but yeah. Lions were able to pull out a tough win. They ran the ball very effectively, especially late in the game and in overtime. David Montgomery still looks to be the clear number one, at least in week one. Maybe that was just a matchup thing, but I keep on asking, why did they draft Jahmyr Gibbs so high if he was just going to be relegated to a number two? Like, that would be like the Falcons drafting Bijan Robinson and him being the number two to Tyler Algier. Like, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, I mean, I'm not going to be too harsh on it because they are winning a lot of games. They are my pick to go to the Super Bowl and my in-heart pick to win the Super Bowl. I obviously said the Chiefs would win just because they're the Chiefs, but I would love it for the Lions to win and kind of break that curse. So they're going to be a really, really good team regardless of if David Montgomery is their number one or Jahmyr Gibbs is their number one. It doesn't really matter. And they looked really, really good on defense as well for most of the game. So I mean, yeah, I didn't see anything to change my mind on the Lions. I just continue to question why David Montgomery is the number one and why you drafted Jahmyr Gibbs at number 12, I think, if he was just going to wind up being a number two running back. Oh, and by the way, Jameson Williams had a great game, finally broke out and had himself a fantastic game. Hopefully he can solidify himself as that true number two and maybe even be a de facto 1B similar to a Brandon Ayuk or something like that. This is a really tough loss for the Rams, but obviously they will not be too upset about it. They played great. It really stinks to lose Puka Nacua. Just got put on the IR a few minutes ago as of time of recording, so he's going to be out at least for the next 4 weeks. So really stings to lose him, but Cooper Kupp looked like his old self. And if you have that, you at least have one weapon that Matthew Stafford can rely on consistently. I think the Rams are going to be a playoff team this year. Nothing I saw this weekend changed that. In defeat, they still looked really, really good. They are going to be a tough team for anybody to beat. They stood toe-to-toe with the best in the NFC and really went out swinging. So I think they did really, really well. Obviously took it to overtime. So the Rams are going to be just fine. Last game of the weekend was the Niners and Jets. Let's talk about the Niners. Yeah, they look like the 49ers. Brandon Ayuk's going to work his way back after kind of holding out for a long time with that new contract. Deebo Samuel looked pretty fine. The one concern, obviously Christian McCaffrey being out. Doesn't look like he's going to play in week 2 either, but it seems like they're just being extra cautious. Hopefully there's no actual structural damage outside of the tendonitis in his Achilles that they've been talking about, but we'll see as the season goes along how serious this becomes. But obviously, with the way that the 49ers were playing and the way that Mason had such a fantastic game, in the stead of Christian McCaffrey, I wouldn't worry about the 49ers too much. I don't remember who they're playing in week 2. Chances are the 49ers are better than whatever team they're playing. There's only like 2 teams in the NFL that the 49ers are not better than right now. Maybe 3 on paper without Christian McCaffrey. There might be 3 teams that are better, but I wouldn't think that the 49ers are going to be suffering too much without Christian McCaffrey. They should be extra cautious with him. It's much more important that he plays in weeks 10 all the way through to playoffs and hopefully Super Bowl than it is for him to play week 1 through 5. The New York Jets, man, they had a tough kind of draw for their first week. Aaron Rodgers hasn't really played a game in 2 years. He's coming off an Achilles. He's 40 years old. Who's his first opponent? Only like the best defense in football on the road. Yeah, it's a really tough thing. And so people saying, Aaron Rodgers doesn't have it anymore. No, he hasn't played a game in 2 years, and he played one of the best defenses in the NFL. He wasn't going to play well. This was just a game. None of us, at least I didn't, think that he was going to go out there and bomb for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. I'm sorry. It just wasn't going to happen. Now, obviously, you would have liked to see the offense play a little bit better, but at the same time, there were quite a few drops that I saw. I saw at least 3 drops one from Lazard, one from Hall, and I can't remember who the other one was. Maybe Wilson, I think. But yeah, at least 3 drops is what I saw when I watched the game. I may have missed some, obviously, or be misremembering, but they obviously dropped a few balls on their end that would have helped them out. Aaron Rodgers looked a bit slow, looked a bit rusty, wasn't really stretching downfield. Obviously had a nice touchdown to Allen Lazard. I think it was 35 or 36 yards, something like that, on a free play, like he does better than anybody else. But at the same time, you would have liked to have seen Aaron Rodgers play a little bit better than he did, but nothing that causes me too huge a concern. Again, they were playing a really, really good passing offense, and it doesn't get much easier because they're playing the Titans next week, and the Titans, as I mentioned earlier, are also really good in the pass game. So we'll see what happens, but again, no reason to panic. I still think the Jets are going to end up making the playoffs, but obviously Aaron Rodgers has to shake off that rust, and he has to do it quick.